Genesis chapter 26, verse 12. And Isaac sowed in the land, and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man became rich, and gained more and more, until he became very wealthy. And he had possessions of flocks and herds, and many servants, so the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we. So Isaac departed from there, and encamped in the valley of Gerar, and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. And when Isaac's servant dug the valley, and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, The water is ours. So he called the name of the well Esek, which means contention, because they contended with him. Then he dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he called his name Sitnah, which means enmity, strife, even hate. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called the name of it Rehoboth, which means broad places, saying, For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. We see that Isaac goes in Gerar after he has had the edict issued to protect him. Abimelech issued that when he found out that Rebekah was Isaac's wife. That edict's been issued, and then Isaac sows in the land, he farms, he reaps 100-fold. He gets very wealthy from the crop that he reaps. And, same type of description. The Philistines are not happy. Now, the Philistines and the Israelites have all of this tension throughout the generations, throughout the ages, and it even starts here. There's division and strife between them because of wells. The Philistines have filled them in, which is kind of interesting too, because they had a treaty with Abraham, and I don't know, kind of seems like they may have been reneging on that treaty. But they filled in the stuff, and there was strife between the Philistines and Isaac. So Isaac moves a little farther, and he settles down. It's very interesting too that we constantly are reading about Isaac settling, whereas we read about Abraham sojourning. Abraham traveled a lot more. Isaac settles down a lot more in his life. He is not. He travels some, but again, he was in Gerar, and now he's in the valley of Gerar. He hasn't traveled that far, but he redigs the wells that his father dug, which reminds us of several principles in Scripture. We are told to regard and to honor the landmark and the memorials of our forefathers. It is important to honor those who have gone before us, not to immortalize them and worship them, but to honor their legacy and the things they did. Isaac digs these wells. He redigs the wells of his father Abraham. He was probably practically using them for his flocks and his livestock, but at the same time, he is honoring his father by doing that, and he names them. But at the same time, he digs another one because of all the trouble that they're having. And then he's able to settle down once he digs that third well, because they didn't quarrel over it. And so he now has, okay, I got enough room, I can be fruitful. God's given us space. There's broad places is what he names that well, Sitnah. And another interesting thing that this passage always reminds me of is spiritually digging wells. Now, this is a spiritual application. This is not the text. This is not the implication of the passage. I want to make that very clear. This that I'm going to share now comes more from things I've learned in life, application, and just kind of sharing from my own experience what this reminds me of from what I've learned in my life. One of my pastors growing up taught me something. He said that in my life, in ministry and just my own spiritual life, that I needed to make sure that I was drinking from multiple wells and not just drinking from one well. And his point there was spiritually, that I need to constantly be learning and growing, digging new wells, digging down and different sources of water. His caution was not to become dependent on one, like not to find one Christian author that really ministers to me and just read them and never open another book. Um, but to continue to be open and humble and to learn, to always be seeking to learn and dig wells and find good, sound sources of spiritual water where I can tap into and drink deeply from. And when I find one, drink a lot, but still be looking for others. And that is not the teaching of this passage I want to make clear, but it's something that this passage always reminds me of because it was a powerful lesson in my life. And spiritually, there is something about us digging the wells, I think, and remembering the wells of our forefathers. If we have been blessed to have had believers in our family, our parents, our grandparents, other relatives, um, tapping into the legacy they left and the wells they left. There may be certain phrases that they always said about their faith that can be a source of comfort to us and strengthen us in the middle of dry times, can be a well, if you will, of spiritual water and vitality. Also, we may actually have some actual things from our family members. They may have passed away, or they may still be living, and they may have an old Bible or books that they allow us to use, and their notes are scribbled in, and we're able to read those notes and see those highlights. And we're ministered to by the gems, so to speak, the wells they dug, the gems they mined. We're able to taste of that spiritual water and hold on to those spiritual nuggets that they mined for us, that they mined and God used in their life, and we can also be ministered to from them. So that's kind of just a little aside, something that it reminds me of, and maybe that's a helpful analogy for you as well in our life to apply, continue to grow in our life and to learn from others. We're going to leave off here today, and tomorrow we're going to see Isaac go a little bit further, journey and having an interaction with the Lord. It's going to be a very interesting part that we see there. Again, a lot of this story we're seeing kind of a condensed version of what happened with Abraham. Abraham had this very long, more detailed account in this long journey and these sojournings. And Isaac has more kind of pit stops, if you will. He settles somewhere for a while, then he moves on, settles down again. But he's not sojourning type quite the same way. He's more of a settled man in many regards. He does move around some, but not nearly as much as his father did. So we're going to pick up next time and see him having an encounter with the Lord.